rock and roll. We got 5 minutes. It looks like everybody has kind of leveled off and joining. So we got the big kahuna Tim talking about best practices in app packaging. So I'll stop sharing so you can steal the screen of dreams here.
All
And
right.
we can shake and bake and get our nerd on here. So definitely welcome everybody for joining us on this webinar. Looks like it's clicking. I see things. John, Justin, either one of y'all see it just to make sure we're not crazy before we release the hounds. If you'll post in the chat, we got it. Got 5 by 5. That's what I like to hear. All right.
All right.
Shake and bake. Let's go.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. And hi, everybody. Glad to be back here with the world of EUC. Looking forward to that event coming up later this year out in, where is that, Patrick? Minneapolis, Minnesota this year?
Yep. Up in the Milwaukee area
Milwaukee.
there.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, for those of you who have seen me in the past, what I'm going to do today is probably a little bit different than what you've seen. So my name is Tim Mangan, TMurgent Technologies. I'm a Microsoft MVP for the last 19 years. And I really deal with getting the applications ready for enterprises, helping IT teams do that work. So the talk I'm going to give today is primarily non-technology related, meaning I'm not really going to be talking about MSIX so much. I'm going to be talking about whatever applications and processes that you're using to get those applications delivered out to users. What I want to do is actually start to launch what is my project for this year, which is to create a new framework and language for what enterprises are doing. And I'm calling this the application pipeline. And the idea is that this is going to be something that's totally technology independent, but it'll provide a base work, a base layer, a framework that you would construct your pipeline for. So the way that you generate those applications. So I know that I do have a whole bunch of people in there following because they want me to talk about MSIX. If we have enough time, I'll talk with MSIX a little bit on the end. But just for everybody in general, I do want to have this one slide at least that talks about kind of where we are right now. Because every year I create this report card for MSIX, and I've got the link there on the slide, where I take a look at the state of where MSIX is. And we've come quite a long way over the last number of years. And this is probably the last year that I'm printing out and creating this report card because we've gotten to the point that MSIX is really completely ready for the enterprise. We've actually hit a point this year. I didn't think we'd get there for another year or more before we got to this point, but we hit this point where now the application compatibility for MSIX exceeds that of the application compatibility when you repackage for App-V. And that's a major milestone for where I've been trying to get it. We'll continue to work on this and try to make this a little better going forward. But we're really at a point where it is what enterprises should be looking at. Now, I don't directly measure against some of the other technologies for application packaging out there. So whether you're talking about the app layering like solutions or Numescent, for example, I don't test against those, so I don't exactly know what would be better, one or the other, on an overall basis for enterprises. But basically, they're really all in the same state. The only one that I would say that could be better situationally would be MSI. If you were repackaging the MSI, you probably can get a higher percentage than we can do in any of those other technologies. But of course, MSI doesn't work if we're talking about a non-persistent VDI or a semi-persistent scenario like the RDS server, Citrix, Horizon, where you need that application delivered very rapidly. I mean, MSI clearly does not work for that. But even the compatibility with MSI is actually starting to take a downtick. And we've seen some vendors in this last year that are now creating what I call a hybrid installer that they're giving you. So they're giving you an MSI or an EXE installer, and it's doing that for most of the installation. But what Microsoft has been doing has been making changes to the OS that they want to take advantage of. So they also are dropping down an MSIX package and installing that just to get that extra integration into the user experience. So they're starting to recognize the vendors that the old way isn't cutting it. They're taking shortcuts at it right now with this hybrid approach. And I think as they start to see that we can make their applications work without their source code, they're now going to be going back and taking a look at how do they get themselves released out in MSIX so you can start taking those packages in natively. All right, so that's my MSIX slide for the day, at least for now. Um, so I did want to create this project. I'm calling it the application pipeline. And it's really sort of twofold. And one, I want to provide a standard list of things about the ways that enterprises handle applications over the full lifetime of the application and provide a sort of working list that your organization can choose from to try to put their application pipeline together. The second part of it is I also wanted to try to define some common terms so that we're all talking about the same things in the same way. And ideally, you would be able to talk with, for example, third-party vendors that want to sell tools for you that would fit in this space and have a better understanding about what they're supplying and what pieces of the puzzle that are important to your organization may be missing that you still need to cover. So we're trying to make all of that work just a little bit better. Now, I've been working with enterprise IT groups. Typically, the desktop engineering group is probably the most common name they give it, but the folks who are really preparing these applications and getting them ready for almost 25 years now. And about 20 years ago, I started doing trainings for the App-V packaging group. And what I found in working with them is that they actually had no formal process within their organization about how to do this work. Everything was just being done completely ad hoc. And so we started working with these groups and trying to get them to sort of formalize what is the procedures that you use and put in place. And it really has taken hold. And as I'm training folks today, they have a process. When I ask them that question, do you have a process to do this? Does it look kind of like this? And they say yes. But when I start digging under the covers, what I find out is they had a person who a number of years back wrote down the process and they're kind of using that process. But if I ask something specifically like, well, when was the last time you actually read that process? I get answers like, well, I've never actually seen it. I was just kind of told about it. And, and they end up with many of their applications really being done using snowflake-like processes because they're just kind of winging it as they go. So I think it's time that we start to get a little more formalized on this and for organizations to go back and really try to get a good process. So that's what I'm trying to do. The reasons for this is that enterprises continue to have huge application sprawl. I'm sure if I was in a room, I could ask your for your organizations, how many different PDF readers do you have deployed within your organization? I'd get a whole bunch of people. If I said, okay, how many have two? Almost everyone would have their hands up. If I got up to five, I'd still get maybe 30% of the room with their hands up because we just take these things in, we take these requests, and we just supply them without thinking about it. Second thing is security. And the security risks associated with not only the applications, but also the underlying frameworks that those applications are dependent upon are things that organizations have to start addressing. The concept of just install and forget is long past, and we need to have an active pipeline of applications and a process to be keeping these things updated on a more constant basis. I see organizations that have problems with backlogs of how long it takes to get application requests satisfied. And largely that has to do with a lot of manual processes. And I think there's a lot of work we can do to reduce many of those manual processes, which will help improve that consistency in how the applications are prepared. The other thing is that application life cycles themselves are just plain shortening. Win32 apps have been around forever, and they probably will because Microsoft can't actually kill them because it would kill the OS itself. But .NET framework-based applications, those have about a 15-year lifespan to it. And we're coming close to the end of even the last of the .NET frameworks. We're down to about 4.8 and 4.8.1 as the last two. Now, again, I don't think Microsoft can actually kill those off as fast as they might like, but we may soon see that we're in a spot where those things are not receiving security updates for those frameworks. Microsoft has said there is a lifespan on that. I think they're going to have to go back on that, but we have to be concerned on that. But the newer applications, those things that are built in .NET 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and now even 10, those things have either a 3 or 5 year lifespan at the most. And that's from the date that Microsoft released that framework. That says that .NET 7, for example, is already out of security support. They're not producing new fixes for security issues on that. So if any apps on .NET 7, those things really need to start getting moved to .NET 8 and 9 and 10 by those vendors immediately. So these life cycles are shortening. You've got more work to do, and oh yeah, you probably have less people to do that work, right? So these are the reasons to try to take some time and get organized and do this in a better process. Okay. So we want to take this ad hoc art that we've been doing, put it into more of an industrialized process, have a standard workflow. And the key on this is that for every new application you're going to deploy, you're obviously not going to go just back and try to do everything. But for anything new that comes through, it's going to have to go through this pipeline. It's very important that when you do get your pipeline established, you ensure that everything has to go through that pipeline going forward. If you don't do that, you're never going to get out of the hole you're in. So this is a quick graphic of the way that I'm kind of viewing this pipeline. We have a number of different steps and different things that organizations will do in these steps. And not all organizations are going to do all of the possible things that are in there. But there will be a point at which there may be some sub pipelines. You may be doing things one way for one situation and differently for another. Very common example would be if I'm doing something for that non-persistent environment, I'm going to need a format that's either app layering, App-V, or app attach to be able to quickly stream or bring those applications into the user environment after login. But if I'm also delivering those same apps out to a more persistent environment, maybe I'm using Intune to deliver those, you're going to have a different sub pipeline for how you prepare those. Now, there can be a lot of commonality in that work, and that's some of the stuff that we'll talk about. But you will end up having some separate pipelines. And that needs to be understood as part of this framework. So when we talk about the first step on this, which is that single intake, most organizations today do have a way for the end user organizations to signal that they have an application or an application update that they'd like to have. It could be done through email. It could be a web portal form they fill out. It could be opening a trouble ticket to the help desk, and that's how you do that. But you have a way to get that input in and a way to start tracking that. Additionally, organizations need to start being a little bit more proactive on some of these things. There are CVE lists that should be monitored. If some application or framework you're built on has a CVE, by the time you can see it in that CVE list, you probably have an application update that's available to you to solve that problem. So you can use that as a trigger to bring that into the intake. You can also be looking at the vendor websites themselves, and there are third-party products that exist out there that you could buy and make part of your workflow that will automatically help you track that stuff. But there's also some free stuff out there. If you look at Aaron Parker's project, I've lost the name. Project Green something or other. He gives you the ability to have your list of applications and just query his website, and he will let you know if there's a new version of that out there, and you could bring that into your application pipeline here. Okay, so but having a formalized method to get those inputs in is important. And again, every application going forward should go through this because it's not just a question of having that formalized method in, but this is also going to trigger the tracking and making sure that all of the steps get done, provide management a way to see where things are and why some things are taking longer to do that. Another piece of it is rationalization. So here, particularly when we're getting a new application, a request for a new application that's not in our organization yet today, we want to take a look at, is this application really fit for the use that they want? Is this the best application that's out there? Typically on any reasonable application request, there's 2 or 3 apps out there that you could consider using in place of the one that they requested. And maybe they requested just one that they heard about, and maybe that's the one they need, but maybe it's not. And certainly if you already have one of the others in place in the organization, you might want to push back on that request a little bit and say, hey, couldn't you use this one instead? And we could help cut down on some of that sprawl. Some of the other things you might be looking at is just basic vendor reputation. There are certain vendors that I think we can see that they constantly are being targeted by malware, and maybe they're not a great choice for your organization right now. And so you might not be quite as high on that application or the application from that version, from that vendor. You may also have a security department that wants to take a look at a security risk assessment. So I know even in my own case, I sell software out to enterprises. I'm seeing more and more enterprises coming to me before they buy and saying, okay, our security team is here and we've got this questionnaire that you need to fill out about your software so we can decide whether or not this is going to be a risk in our environment. I'm seeing more organizations start to do that. By the way, I'm seeing more organizations start to do that very, very poorly. Particularly for me as a small company, a lot of the questions I get just are totally not applicable. If I were a major corporation, some of those things might make some more sense. And so enterprises that are starting to do this, they're kind of going at it on a one questionnaire type of basis. And the questionnaires don't really allow, in some cases, to explain some of the things in it. I see some of these, I just get questions that's like, do you do this? Yes or no? And there is no place for you to put in any commentary about why you said no, right? And so I think those will evolve over time. But I'm seeing more enterprise security groups start to get involved in the process for the applications that they're purchasing. Okay, so once we've been through those phases, we look at categorization. And here we could be looking at this in a number of different ways. There may be some use case specific kinds of requirements that are there. There may be some factors within the application. And these are all things you're really looking to categorize to understand how you're going to package it up and maybe how it's going to be delivered, right? So if this is going to be needed on that Citrix server, for example, you know you're going to have to deliver that in some type of either streaming or the app attach method, or at least an app layering method to be able to get that thing. And that's going to affect the rest of your sub pipelines. We also want to take a look at potentially being able to automate, particularly for applications you're going to be updating frequently. We want to build automation into this whole process. And so we'll start to take a look at some of those while we're in this kind of categorization step. Ideally, at the end of this, though, we have only one category, but the reality is going to be that there's going to be more than one branch in your pipeline. Now, in addition to taking a look at things like how you're delivering it, you might also have sub-pipelines based on the nature of the application itself. So if it's a well-known application, one that's already in your organization, you're just doing updates, you may have a pipeline for that. And that pipeline is going to be built for speed, right? You can build a lot of automation into an app like that because you already know how to do it. It's just a question of bringing in that new version, cranking the crank a little bit, and then testing the application and make sure it works. If it is a non-standard application that's new to the organization, well, we know that that's going to have to go through a slower pipeline. There's going to have to be some research done into how do I get the silent install that I need? How does this application try to do automatic updates? And how do I turn that feature off so that IT can be in control of those updates? Those are the kinds of things that would be going on in that non-standard pipeline. And as part of that, hopefully, we would be able to take that application and be able to automate it so that it can become a standard application in the future when it does update. Then we might have those line of business applications, and those tend to be some of the worst applications I see out in the enterprise. It's this one big application. Typically, it started being built in the early 2000s. It has all sorts of band-aids all over it, as it's been ported and changed and moved to do different environments over the years. And as we start looking at those applications, the enterprise really doesn't understand how the current application works at all. And so when we try to take that and then bring it into some type of new environment, it is very, very difficult to do that. These are applications that have a high amount of risk associated with them. So when they go out, they have to work perfectly. In some organizations, we get extremely short life cycles on them, where the application has to update once a month, or in some cases, once a week. And you can't miss the update because there are back-end components that are also changing on that same pace, and those two have to come out at the same time. So there's a lot of pressure on getting these applications done on time and correctly. Now, some of what that meant, by the way, on these breaking up the pipelines in this fashion is also about kind of the level of talent that you're putting on these applications, right? You can put some more junior people on those standard applications, but that line of business application is going to have your top person to be sure that you meet your deadlines properly. So within one of those sub pipelines, we kind of go through these steps here, starting with in the preparation. Hopefully, some of this can carry across to other sub pipelines, right? So when we take a look at the application, IT generally wants to control some of the features of the application. So we're looking at things like the auto update process. So most of the time, we want those features defeated as part of the packaging process. We want to make sure that the vendor doesn't just send out an update and it shuts down half your company for a day. I've been on site during a training session when that happened. Google Chrome, I was at one site, Google Chrome put out an update, and it literally shut down all of the people who were doing the productive work to make money at that company for that morning until we got that update taken out to solve the problem. And it wasn't anything that Google did bad. In their case, they had a line of business app that ran in the Chrome browser, and it just happened to break their application. And it was a huge surprise to everybody, and a lot of red faces in the IT group over that problem. But also as part of this preparation, I like to try to get this application automated. So, what are the silent install arguments? What are the other arguments that we can do during that installation time to control some of these features? Maybe we want to turn certain things on and off within it. Maybe we need to pre-configure that application. So maybe it needs to work with a back-end database. We don't want the end user to have to do that. So we want to deliver this application pre-configured. So we want to figure all of that out. And the way that I usually end up doing that is by wrapping the installation inside some type of PowerShell wrapper where I do all of these things. We'll install the application and do all the customization all in one place there. So we do that as part of the packaging operation if we're trying to repackage into something. But that same script could be used in an Intune push out as well. So we can do this once across all of the different pipelines, and that's really the best way to be doing this. So once we've done that, and if we're repackaging or just going to push out through an Intune, we then want to quickly smoke test that style of installation, check out the results, make sure that it basically works, and then we have a solid asset that we can then pass on to a user acceptance test to take it through the fuller testing that has to occur before it gets pushed out to production. That next step is that UAT test. And UAT is an area which is very ripe for automation. I know the guys out at Remo 3 are pretty good at doing this automated testing. And quite frankly, I don't think they're even using AI yet today to do that. I think as we start to bring AI into this area, this is an area which is pretty ripe for AI to be able to do some nice things for us and be able to take this UAT testing a little bit further than what we're doing today. But today, I see some folks mostly doing manual UAT testing. So they'll have a expert user, usually in the business unit that's going to use the application. Sometimes it's another part of IT from the packaging group that would be doing that testing. And then for things, particularly those line of business apps or certain companies, there may be a control board that reviews anything that's going to go out into production first. And so that becomes part of this area or part of the timeline here in the pipeline as well. My definition of a control review board, by the way, is just a group of people that says no to everything. All right, after that, you're going to get into deployment, and this is certainly going to have different technology involved. It's usually very highly automated. People are just taking the output package that we have, pushing it through a production system. Part of the deployment may be directly assigning the users. Many organizations, I actually see one group that takes care of putting it into their deployment system, like if it's an Intune, and another group that worries about getting users assigned to those and managing the licensing associated with it. Other organizations, they organize this a little bit differently. So in the framework, I'm not trying to depict what groups are involved in this, but different organizations are going to be set up a little bit differently, and there needs to be coordination between those groups. And I prefer not to stop at just the deployment, but we also do need to consider the support organization as we're pushing out these applications. So they're going to need to be able to triage issues as you are going through a major change in how you are delivering or preparing the applications. If you go from App-V to MSIX, you're going to have to spend a little bit of time with the support group, helping them understand how to triage the issues, how to recognize, oh, this is this other thing. I need to take different types of steps when I do my initial looking at that application on the end user system and how I troubleshoot. Ideally, the support organization would know how to solve basic types of problems, particularly if it's just users being stupid. But when necessary, they're going to need to escalate either within the support group or back to the desktop engineering group, particularly as we're bringing in some new technology into the organization. There will probably be a lot of that going on. But beyond just the basic support, there should also be some proactive monitoring going on, looking for our applications being used, our applications being misused, and maybe there are some security issues associated with that. Are we up to date on our licensing? So those are the types of things that some organizations are doing a good job of including in their pipelines today. So in terms of the key takeaways on what I have here, the biggest thing here is that you need to have one pipeline. You have to have something that's well defined and making sure that everything going forward goes through that pipeline. It's an operational model. I'm not trying to talk about specific technologies or tooling that you're using in here. So it's something that you can adopt and look at the pieces that you need in here and define what your pipeline or pipelines look like, and then ensure that everyone is using that going forward. So if you're thinking about some major changes in the future, products you're thinking about bringing into your organization, moving from one type of the way you deploy things to another, maybe you're looking at AVD or Cloud PC, and you're not doing much of that today. It's a really good idea to figure out your concept first and then take a look at, figure out your concept. Figure out what your pipeline looks like first, and then take a look at these solutions and understand where they fit in and where you're going to have to make some own adjustments to the kind of work that people are doing in your organization today on these pipelines to make that solution work within your framework rather than catching up with it once you're trying to start to deploy on this. So again, the goal is we want to be able to architect to be able to get scale, to be able to deliver these applications and these updates faster. We want to improve the security posture of our organization, and I will be talking about more of that after a little bit of a break. And really kind of gain control of what's happening in the applications in your environment. So I did say that this is a project that I'm starting. You are actually the first group that I've talked to about this thing at all. The goal is to end up with a white paper that enterprises can use to create their pipelines. And I am very actively looking for feedback from you. I want to understand more about some of the things that you're doing in your organization today, those things that are working real well for you, those things that aren't working well, things that I have not talked about in here that needs to get into this. And I'll end up producing at some point later this year a white paper that kind of pulls all this together that everyone can use and start working with. So I've got my email up there, and I'd love to hear more from you. We do have more to talk about, but right now I want to check with Patrick and see what type of questions we have.
Well, I mean, the only questions we kind of had was, the mention of Evergreen and Aaron
Thank you
Parker
for
and
that name.
yeah, yeah. So that came up, and then when we were talking about UAT, then of course I had to say test and prod because that's what most everyone does or has to do or thinks that's what they have to do, and that there is not a better way. But other than that, let's see. Let me see if I got any other questions and answers. So we got one. All right, here we go. Here, MSIX and handling something like Microsoft Office add-ins. That's probably a special little critter, isn't it?
It is, and the we cannot do add-ins to Microsoft Office in MSIX today. Okay, that is something that we were able to do with App-V, but that really ended up requiring that you were using the click to run version of Office for your installs, and the click to run version of Office was, of course, really App-V under the covers. And so they had some special tooling that Microsoft created for us to do that. With Office, we really have zero capability to do Office plugins through MSIX today. Now, as Microsoft continues to make progress on their move to MSIX, we've seen, the new Outlook, for example, well, it's really kind of web-based. But, they've brought in Teams. They're starting to do more and more. We'll see that stuff get to MSIX at some point. But the plugins will probably look very differently. The plugins will probably look more the way you do plugins to your web browsers today. So, we probably don't end up having to repackage those plugins because when that happens, we'll get the plugins in MSIX form and just start using them.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and I guess this is, it makes me feel like when I think about Outlook right now and classic and new, that has been such a nightmare for every organization. And I guess even NASA with the Artemis mission with Outlook crashing and making like national news or whatever. I find that awesome and hilarious that we're doing it. And my thing, when the new Outlook came out, then everyone's like, I want classic. And then it was such a difficult process to block one, allow the other, allow this one versus that. And then obviously the look and feel between them for someone that's been using it for like 10 years might be one thing, but it's a huge jump backwards for many people. And yeah, someone just
Yeah.
posted classic all day, every day. Yeah, that's me. The new one is there. And then, I know they're trying to also make it like it's the same between OSs and trying to make it look the same and
Yep.
webify it, make it easier for them. I totally get it. But man, just like we kicked off this whole thing, very small changes in applications and GUIs have such huge impacts. And Microsoft, I think they gave people notifications, but it wasn't until that Windows update happened. Surprise, your Outlook is gone. This is the Outlook you're looking for, or I mean, you're not looking for, but you must use now.
Yeah.
So the joys of IT, I think, right?
Yeah, I know. I hated the new Outlook. I forced myself. I have two laptops that I regularly use. I have one with the new and one with the old. And I've kind of gotten used now to going back and forth between them. And I don't really care which one I have. But it is a huge change to get there. Yeah, I understand that.
Yep.
And Microsoft doesn't do themselves a lot of favors on some of these things.
Yeah, I think it's tough for them because it's like everything probably has to be monetized. And it's like we're going to do this change. How can we pay to do it? And developers and time and and that's the thing. Any Microsoft product requires so much testing that I'm sure a simple little clippy that's tapping on your screen costs tens of millions of dollars to bring to something because of testing and validation and putting it in the pipeline. So
Yeah.
they have to really pick and choose what makes it.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you know, they're those processes do bog them down quite a bit.
Yep.
And quite frankly, that's why enterprises are looking to my PSF and some of my tooling to get the MSIX packages working
Right.
because I'm not limited by so many of the things that Microsoft is limited by, and I've been able over the last 7 years to move way faster than them on
Right.
getting this compatibility up.
Yeah, one person put in there that Office volume license still is click to run, right? Or
Yep.
is it all Office? Because
Uh,
like I think Microsoft 365, if you download it from that, that's no longer click to run,
that's no
right?
longer click to run. Yeah.
So I think it's only volume license is your only hope for now, which I wonder how much longer that will be, you know?
Yeah, I
Yep.
hear you. And
All
no, I
right, well,
can't
let's
say
let's
anything.
shake and bake to round two here.
All right. Yeah, let's get into part two of this because I promised Patrick I talk a little bit more about security because, quite frankly, the desktop engineering folks are not security people. That is another part of the enterprise organization. And one of the things that I need to do is I need to get this better integrated into the pipeline that I was just talking about. So I haven't gotten to do that yet. But here are some of the things that I'm thinking about in terms of that process and where it fits in the application prep space. So number one on this is we're at a point where all software is going to have some type of identity. And we're not there right now. We can be, but we're not. Okay. So when I talk about identity, I'm talking about particularly the executable files themselves. Those are probably the most important. And so are they digitally signed? Can we do a hash against them as a way to provide identity so that we can recognize that, yes, I know what exe this is, and it hasn't changed. So typically you're using one of those two methods. But scripts, Python stuff that's out there. As we're bringing in AI, we have these models. These models need to be secured as well as we do for the executable stuff. The idea of a bad actor coming in and polluting your models that you're using on within these applications becomes a real problem, even if it's just simply influencing the user to then do something bad based on the modified output that the AI model is putting. So these need to be secured. In fact, if you look at what Microsoft is doing with all of their Copilot stuff, all of their models get delivered inside of MSIX packages today. And they're doing that to ensure that they have that level of security, that everything is digitally signed, not necessarily the Onyx files themselves, for example, but the package it's in has been signed and you know it hasn't been tampered with. And that's part of what your security organization is starting to get really concerned about. We talk about things like the supply chain issues that we've seen. Yeah, we had this Notepad++ issue that happened a number of months back, right? So what happened there is Notepad++, they had an auto update mechanism. So it checks with their website, sees that there's a new version, and the user then downloads it and installs that new version. Well, they had a man-in-the-middle attack that occurred in that process. It wasn't a completely secured process that they went through. And as has been reported, a state actor targeted two very specific companies that worked as a man-in-the-middle attack. That if they saw the IP addresses for one of those two companies, they then hijacked and delivered their own payload of the new version of Notepad++, and then got that installed into the organizations, and this was their entry point in. So those types of problems are things that we need to worry more and more about. We need to be paying attention. Are these vendors delivering us something that's in a signed form? Can we verify that? If not, are they providing something like an MD5 hash up on there so that you can validate the thing that you downloaded matches their published spec of what that thing was supposed to be? We now need to start taking more and more attention at this because this is some of the entry points that these groups are using to get inside your companies. Now, we talk about hashes. Hashes is really pretty simple. You're just kind of taking up an algorithm that sums up the bytes that are in the file. And back when I was in the communication industries in the 80s and 90s, we were using these CRC32s as a way of providing hashes for transfers. You look at the TCP/IP protocol. The TCP header has a CRC32 field in there, and it's just adding up the bytes in there and just checking it when it gets received on the other side. They use it as a way to see, did something happen during the transmission? And they're not thinking about, bad people trying to eject things. They were looking at things like, well, we were transmitting in the 80s and 90s over analog lines, and we would get bit corruption. And so they could detect the bit corruption with a CRC32. In fact, actually, they could correct the problem if it was only 1 or 2 bits in a typical 512 byte package, then they can actually correct it on the fly and not have to do a retransmission. MD5 is a stronger version of that, but it still is really intended for just checking, did something transfer properly? It's not really looking for malicious stuff. Some of the newer algorithms that we're using, particularly as we take a look at things like code signing, is the SHA series, the SHA-1 and the SHA-2 series down there. And they're much harder for people to attack at and try to make changes to than these simple hashes that we've had in the past. But the industry is starting to get really concerned about quantum computing. And they're looking at these things and saying, hey, wait a minute, with a quantum computer now, these things aren't as good as they are in the classical world. Now, the bad folks out there aren't using quantum computing yet, but they're thinking about it and they're trying to get ready. Now, it turns out that for hashes, quantum computing doesn't really help them all that much. But as we start talking about encryption, and encryption is used as part of the digital signatures, now we have a very different story out here about what's happening with quantum computing going forward. And they're even seeing some cases out there where they believe that some of the bad actors are just trying to gather as much data as they can and store it away, hoping that in a few years they can use quantum computing to now break that and figure out how to decrypt your stuff. And if you're using the same decryption method, they can decrypt what you had, but they may also be able to use that as a way to look at your newer stuff as well. And so they're getting really concerned about that. And so FIPS just added a new set of algorithms to do a better version of decryption that's designed to be quantum proof, is what they're saying. Now, again, this is all hypothetical, but these are the kind of things that they're saying that they are able to do things that will take a very long time for a classical computer to break it, and at quantum computing, they don't think it's breakable any better in that. So ML-Chem 768 is the official name in terms of the FIPS stuff. But RSA and ECC are things that we probably should stop using now. And even if you're not using the newer one, it might make a lot of sense to go to AES 256 right now for any type of encryption you're doing. So with a digital signature, what we're doing here is we are first taking a hash of the bits of the thing that we're signing, and then we're encrypting that value inside a packet which gets put on the side of the package, which is your digital signature. And that digital signature has a trace to the organization that did that signing. And you are insured through that unless someone has broken the encryption, that whoever signed that package has not changed since they signed it. So anything that was transmitted down, there couldn't be a man-in-the-middle attack unless they replaced the whole thing, in which case they would be signing it with something different, and you need to be looking at that signature. So what we're looking for those in the signatures is that there is something that was signed by a public CA, because that means there's some traceability. That CA is responsible to only issuing that certificate to people that they can validate. And as long as the owner of that certificate hasn't lost their password to the signing, you can feel very good that what you got should be exactly what the vendor intended you to get. And so this is why we want to go this way. This is one of the reasons we want to go to MSIX, because at a package level, we're doing that signing. That's why we want to see vendors signing their EXEs and DLLs so that we know that those things haven't been changed at some way along the way to your systems. So there is a term, a couple of different terms I'm hearing out there for this within the organization. One is affirmation, the other is notarization. It's really the same thing. It's just different terms I see different groups using. And this is the idea that as part of our process of getting these applications ready and through our pipeline, we are going to be making an affirmation that we have looked at this software and we believe it is good for our organization. Because once we have done that, when we have given each of the pieces that we're interested in an identity for that software, then we can take this a step further and take additional actions on our pipeline. And so this could be an enforcement that the affirmation has occurred as part of the deployment process. So your deployment pipeline piece is going to check and make sure that we have affirmation on things in place. It also can be runtime enforcement. So when would that been? That would have been 2003. I wrote a runtime enforcement product that ensured that only allowed software could run on your Windows system. I had that for about a couple of years. Customers kept coming to me, by the way, and they kept saying, oh, no, wait a minute. I don't want just a denied list. I want to have, I don't want just an accepted list. I want to have a denied list. And at the time, I refused to give them that because I said, as soon as I do that, you're just going to say, well, I'm going to allow everything to run. But when I have a problem, then I'll add something in to try to block it in my organization. So I have a quick fix to turn that thing off. And in 2003, it almost made sense to do that because the malware products that were out there were a little slow at producing new lists for you to implement on your systems. They didn't even have great update mechanisms to get them in place. And so you would have big windows between when something was known that you could say, oh, we don't want this, and when your antivirus system would manage to be able to block it. That has changed over the years. But even in those days, I said, no, I don't want to do that. Because as soon as you know what it is, you're trying to add it in here, it's already too late. You're going to have to get that thing out of your system anyway. Unfortunately, Microsoft came out with AppLocker in 2005, and AppLocker provided both mechanisms. And when organizations looked at it, said, well, okay, no, we're going to use AppLocker, and that other product just went out of existence because no one was going to buy it. But how did people use AppLocker? Well, they wildcarded the allowed list, and then just put in a few things on the denied list. And quite frankly, it's not even as good as a Band-Aid, quite frankly, to do that. So Microsoft came out with Windows Defender Application Guard when they came out with Windows 10. That one was a allowed list only. And unfortunately, nobody's used it. But we do have options to do that type of thing. And there are other products that will allow you to do this. Eventually, I'm a believer that enterprises are going to have to go to allowed list. That's the only way you're going to be able to secure your organization from all of these threats. It's not just what am I getting from Microsoft and a couple of key vendors. It's all of those 1,000 applications that you have coming into your organization that you need to worry about that all have their own unique ways of doing things. And you need to start securing yourself with that. And that's going to happen in this pipeline to start with. Okay. All right. Did that bring up any questions?
Nope, not yet, but I 100% agree because I have been talking about AppLocker for years and Windows Defender Application Control and Guard for years, and like 14 people have deployed it. So they're not easy to do right, and I think that's why. And their documentation is not as good as I think it needs to be, and there's not wizards that are meant for enterprises, so it just never happens. So
Yeah.
you can just run whatever you can run, and we just hope your AV of whatever poison or thing you choose catches something. But
Yeah.
most likely, lots of things don't get caught. And so, yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, and for me, the key is we build this into the pipeline. Even if you're not turning that on, we have to build this into the pipeline so that we at least have that identity, so that we have a choice and we have the ability to turn these things on later on. Right now, the biggest problem is turn on. Now I have to know what everything is. And I think we have to start building this into the pipelines.
Yep. Because otherwise, if we don't put a little bit of a sprinkle of security on it, then it'll never get added. And then this is how we are 10, 20, and even 30 years into modern IT, and things are just flapping out in the wind, with no security.
Yeah, I actually added the device guard, the what do they call it, the CI control information, whatever they called that format of the file for identifying the software.
Oh, the little XML thing.
Yeah, I actually built that into my TM Edit product for editing the App-V packages, so that we automatically produce that for every executable as they were going through that packaging process. And I doubt a single company ever used it.
That sounds right.
All right. Well, then, let me. Oh, we're probably almost all the time. Well, let me flash through a few slides to make the folks that came here for MSIX happy.
Oh yeah, you're good. You don't need to rush if because we'll have this recording if it does go long. It's no big deal.
Okay. All right. So what's changed with MSIX, right? So Microsoft has had their packaging tool, and they really have not done much with it. So on the graph that you're looking at there, that bright green is the application compatibility that I could get out of that tool over the years. And so, they came out with something. It was fine, but they really haven't done a whole lot to it. But what Microsoft has done is all the stuff under the covers, extending the AppX manifest so we have more capabilities that we can declare for that installation, changes to the app installer, which is the piece of software that adds that package to your system, and a whole bunch of operating system integrations to make use of this. And they've done a lot of work in that area. So what I've been doing with is making the package support framework a little bit better. And the package support framework is something that we need to make some of these older applications work inside of MSIX, but then making fuller use of all of that other work that Microsoft has done. And that's how we've gone from the basically 30% that Microsoft can do to the 95% compatibility that we get out of taking it through the way that I do the packages here. I've also built a lot of automation into that over time. So it used to be a very manual process, and now we're able to do most of this work automatically for you. And I'll show you a little bit about that. But the whole concept of what I've been trying to do is to get that application compatibility up and make it less work for you to be able to get there. So that ends up being a workflow that kind of looks like this. We're starting with the installer media. I'm creating a wrapper script for the installation and customization for that software. We're then, and that can be in something like PSADT. I know that's become very popular, especially in the Intune area. I see some other companies that love chocolatey. I have my own PowerShell module called Passive Install that I use, and that could be combined with some of those others because it has some unique attributes to it and some unique commandlets in there, which are useful for the kinds of things you want to do when you're installing and customizing an application. We then go through a capture process, so we can use the Microsoft packaging tool, but there are third-party vendors out there that have their own captures that will go into MSIX as well, and we can work with those. We then go through a polishing operation. So this is a paid-for tool that I have called TMEditX, and that looks at everything the vendor put down as part of their install and produces the best possible MSIX package for you. And then I have some free tools, community tools that are out there to help with the what do you do after you have that package. And so we have these TMEditX tools, and that provides us some test and debugging capabilities to help make this process work a little bit faster. But this is the basic packaging portion of that workflow when we're doing MSIX. This is an example wrapper script that I use here where I'm installing, in this case, some dependencies. I was actually keeping the VC runtimes in this package because the customer wanted to do it that way rather than keep them external. Installing the application, I could have either a silent or a passive style install. So if I'm packaging up and I'm going out to Intune, I want that to be a silent install. I don't want the end user interfering with anything. If I'm doing it for a repackaging process, I prefer a passive style where those UIs will show up, but they'll still be automated. But I can see the progress going on, or if there's a problem because I'm still just writing the script for the first time, I can see what that problem is. Right. And if I had other customizations afterwards, I could add other things in like that. This is an example of another one. For those of you who do know this product, something that's coming up in the next release of TMEditX that I haven't had is the ability to create a brand new package. So there's this new tab that's going to show up in here. And so this will allow us to create a blank package. So if you're doing something like a plugin, so you have a main package and you just want to add in a plugin to it, rather than have to go through a repackaging process on the plugin, I've had a whole bunch of customers ask this from me. And so we can create a blank package. You can drop the files in, mark it as a modification package, and be good to go. Okay. But typically what you're going to do is you're going to open up that package you got from whatever the capture process you had is, run it through. It's going to do an analysis. It'll display this screen here. If you just want to do the simple operation to get a new package, a better package, you would just hit this top button, all default fixes. We'll do some cleanup. We'll take a look at whether or not we need to add the package support framework and what components we need, what configuration to do for that, and then a whole bunch of recommended fixes based on what we see in the package, as well as configuration policy that you set up about how you want to do things. Right? So I talked about that VC runtimes, for example. Some companies want the VC runtimes in the packages because they make sure that the package will absolutely work on whatever system they put it on. Others want to keep those runtimes out of the package, and they're going to manage the VC runtime distributables on client systems and manage them in just one place. So if there's a security problem, they only fix it one place and they don't have to touch those packages. That's what enterprises probably should be doing. Well, we'll provide a policy here for you to take care of that because some groups are doing that today and some aren't, and they still want them in the packages. Once you've done those, there are optional fixes. So these are things that we can't just look at the package and know what it is you're going to want. These are special things that you might only need for a few packages. Or maybe you've turned off the feature and said, I don't want you to do this, in which case we'll move it from a recommended fix into the optional fix area. So you can add these things in, but you do have a full package editor available. You can go into the file system, the registry system. You can go into the AppX manifest file and make whatever detail changes you might need to make. But for the most part, you're pretty much just going to come in and hit this button. And by the way, this is also command line operational. So we can simply have an automated pipeline that does the packaging, then runs this tool with a command line that says, fix it up for me, as command line overrides for things. So if you had a particular application that you're constantly repackaging and it needs one special tweak, you can do that from the command line. And in 10 minutes from when you decide, oh, here's my new installer, you can have a new package ready to test. Once we've saved the package off, if we are going to do app attach, we can convert it into any of the three app attach forms here in the tool as well. Okay. Now, for the community tools, there's two pieces to it, MSIX deploy and the parse PSF debug log. MSIX deploy allows you to locally deploy that package, even the app attach packages, without having to go to a server infrastructure. So it's very fast testing. I package, I fix, I immediately locally deploy on the machine I'm on. I can do my testing. It provides some extra debugging tools to do that. Parse PSF debug log is basically the CM trace for the package support framework. So it'll look at the log files produced by the PSF and provide you some good debug ways to see that debugging. So this is the MSIX deploy tool. I've pointed it to a share here. I can see the various packages I have. I can see what components of the PSF are in those. I can also look at an analysis report here from that package that tells me how this application wants to integrate with the user. What are the shortcuts? What are the file associations, the shell extensions, the protocol handlers, all of that stuff listed, as well as what are the changes you made when you did that polishing of the package, right? I can right click, install that package, and then once it's installed, if I want to get inside the environment of the container, I can come in here and right click on the package and start a command prompt or Windows terminal, and I can see exactly what the application was seeing. So this is kind of the thing that we would have done in App-V in the past. It's a little more difficult with MSIX, but we give you a tool here to make it easy for you to do that. All right, so that's kind of where we are in terms of the pipeline if you're doing the MSIX stuff. And with that, that's everything I had, Patrick.
That is awesome. I'm glad you were able to you got so much into this through here, the amount of content. So I hope everyone does it. Let's see. I'm looking for questions. I don't see any questions. I don't see any posts. If anybody has anything, definitely post it in here. And the one thing, if you saw the slide that he had earlier, definitely reach out and get help as part of that project, because the amount of data that he's able to get and collect and share is amazing. I think about what you've done when it comes to application installs, and I think about like Benny and Ruben and Elto and the people part of EUC Score and stuff like that, of all the projects, and Christian and everybody in our EUC community that do these projects and share these things. It's so cool to see, and that's what it's all about. Yep. Oh, there you go.
Yes.
Yep. Perfect.
So I am looking for input from folks on this pipeline. I'd really like to include everyone's ideas. I'm even open, by the way, if some folks want to be early reviewers of the work. I would be glad to have some eyes on it as it gets into a little more solid format before we push this thing out.
Yep.
Just reach out to
Yep.
me.
And it looks like we just got a question right for here. Click the little thingy. And of course, they updated the UI, so this thing's popped out. Not packaging specific, but since VC runtimes was said multiple times, is it ever a bad idea to just install the latest VC runtimes and rely on backwards compatibility for the app? As in, we're going to keep it up to date, even if the app doesn't say so, just so that we're okay. But can we create more headache for ourselves?
I would say no, that your best practice is to do exactly that.
Hmm.
Have the VC runtimes, the latest versions being patched automatically. Backward compatibility on those is really, really good.
Okay.
I can't say never. It'll never be a problem, but we just don't see that happen.
Oh, and then I had someone post on the WinGet of talking about that, of using it.
Yeah. So WinGet, I'm a huge fan of WinGet. The public repository though is a scary place,
Yeah.
and yeah, you might not want to be doing that. I do love the idea. If you think WinGet is a good idea, the concept that you set up your own internal WinGet repository.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that is kind of that affirmation piece that I said, that you validated it and you put it
Yeah.
there and you use that as a delivery method. I wish every system, Intune, Citrix, Horizon, I wish they would do a WinGet style for their final push out and do it that way.
Yep.
I really like that.
Well, and I've worked with a couple of customers that had their private WinGet set up, and it was like it felt like it's missile silo. It's the two keys, right? The chunk. Okay, the what's at the public is wild, wild west, but we
Yeah.
can click it here, and now I can actually push it and do all my automations in there.
Now, I
Um,
did do just this winter. I did a check of the Winget repository. I was trying to figure out how much MSIX is out there, and I actually found that there were a little over 150 MSIX packages up in the public Winget repository. I've never been able to do that with the Microsoft Store because
oh yeah,
basically I have to buy everything. That's not going to happen.
yep.
But I actually got a little hint from Microsoft on how I can look at the store and determine what's MSIX and what not. So I'm
Oh, like a
looking
filter
at
that you
that.
can run and query it.
I can't really query, but yeah,
Yeah,
we'll do something.
there's some nerdy things.
Yeah.
Looks like replace. Don't because yeah, because one person also asked about VC runtimes if they stack on top of each other like Javas, right? If
Well,
you
when we
keep
talk about
installing.
replacing the latest VC runtimes, we're talking about the 2015 to 20 to the end of to everything newer series.
Yeah,
The old stuff we can't replace. I mean, those things we have to, and then the best thing to do there is actually to keep them in the packages only for the apps that need it.
gotcha. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense. Let's see here. Yeah, stacking, was for 2008 and others, and now we're version 14 and on for longer, no longer years, right? Kind of thing.
Yeah. Although not that Microsoft has done everything perfect there. So when I talk about the VC distributables, that's the traditional install redistributables. Microsoft did this really stupid thing is they actually have MSIX packages called VC libs. And their intent was that we would add them as references to our MSIX packages, and you would deploy the VC libs as a separate piece and it would automatically layer in. They totally messed it up though because there's two packages, one for x86 and one for x64, and we can only get the x64 one to work.
Huh. That's well, I
So
mean, if you
it's
just
like,
run it on Windows XP, it'll probably be fine, is what I've heard, you know?
yeah, there we go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, all right. Well, this is great. And thanks for all the input, everybody, and everybody hanging out here as we kind of wrap up for the day. We've got some events and upcoming webinars coming up here. So we got Nashville over by my part of town in just a couple days, 2 days away. We've got a great one on Insights webinar, beating burnout, which is I think a very important thing in our IT world because it's pretty easy to do in our world because in IT you never can fully unplug, so you're always getting pinged and rattled and teams notified and teams called and this calls and this thing. So definitely a really good one. I'm looking forward to that one. And then we've got Chicago, Wisconsin, and Colorado all here in the month of April, so it's nice and busy. And then let's click on there. And then we have UC World Virtual. So if you've got your little phony poo and you want to take a picture of a QR code that goes somewhere to help you do something fun, then this is it. This is going to be a great event, and the sessions that we have are awesome right now, and they're just keep getting better. We have, the good thing about the world of EUC is we get to talk about the whole world of EUC and not just vendor one and vendor two. We get to talk about all the vendors, all the applications, all the security, all the automation, all that. And Jen just posted that in the chat too. If you just want to click there, if you don't want to use your phone to take a picture of your screen and look weird, especially if you're in the office. And then you have the big Kahuna event there up in Milwaukee, September 29th to October 1st. EUC World Amplify. This is basically, our third event building on what we've done. Our first one was, in homage to Bry Forum and Brian Madden and Sean and all them that did, and Gabe that did so much for our world. And I mean, Tim, you were there too in the Bry Forum old days. And so we did that there. And then we were up in Minnesota last year, and that was great. And so now we're up in just Milwaukee, just a little bit different. And this should be a great event. And I know that there's a couple really cool sessions that are there too, and some application related things there too. So the in person events are going to be definitely the place to go to get out of the house. And, make sure you always get the most out of the world of EUC. We have webinars all the time, regular schedules on that. We've got a big video library if you go to YouTube, and then if you look on the website and go back that way. Lots of blogs, lots of podcasts, which some of the webinars will turn into podcasts. That way, depending on how you're consuming media, you can learn about EUC things no matter where you're at. And there's lots of other benefits in the benefits program, especially with partners like Liquidware and other things like that are in there. And we saw this even on the webinar today. If you haven't joined Slack, definitely join Slack. There's always so much content in there. I know I have posted things in there and got responses back at random times throughout the day that I did not think I was going to get. And we're talking about everything in there when it comes to the EUC world. So definitely check that out. And as always, thank you so much for attending. Tim, thank you so much for your time and your insights. It was a great event. It seems like everybody keeps seeing a bunch of people saying, yes, it was awesome. So thank you all for everything. And I hope everyone has a great week and weekend. And we will catch y'all soon on the next thing. Later, Gators.